I used to love Huawei products. They're one of the very few tech companies that no matter what, I would always tune in to see what they were announcing next, because it just felt like they were consistently trying something new. Then they got banned in 2019. They got banned from selling in the US, they got banned from working with US companies, and they even got banned from working with companies that just use US technology. It was brutal. And given how critical US tech is in the making of a smartphone, everything from the software to the chips to the antennae to get signal, everyone just kind of assumed, well, Huawei is just going to slowly die over the next couple of years and fade into history. But 4.5 years have passed since that ban, and Huawei is not dead. They're still making new products with new features that you probably didn't even know tech products could do right now. Which begs two questions. How are they doing that with all the restrictions? And also, how good are the products now? I've been surprised. I think you will too. So this is their latest stuff. Let's go from the tablet to the earphones to the watches to the thing that I'm most curious about, the smartphones. So this is the MatePad paper mat, and on the face of it, it seems pretty unremarkable. It feels very mid-range, like nothing bad about it, but just standard. Standard materials, standard looking camera, standard screen bezels. It's all about what you'd expect for a tablet just under $500. So it doesn't feel as good as Samsung or Apple's top-end tablets. The screen is this matte IPS panel. It's not OLED, and so you might be able to tell that while it can reach a high level of brightness, it just looks a tiny bit faint. It lacks that crunchy contrast, and also has a school computer from your IT suite kind of vibe to it. And also, it's running a mid-range Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 chip, so it's not the fastest. Like, if you check out the delay between my finger hitting this capture button and the tablet actually capturing, that's pretty criminal. But this is where we start to diverge from the tablets you might know. See, this is not running Android. This tablet is running Harmony OS. So years before the US ban actually came into place, clearly Huawei saw it coming, and they'd started working on a backup plan. An operating system of their own that didn't rely on Google's Android, and I guess to compensate getting kicked out of the Google group, a way to create their own group to seamlessly integrate all of their products. Now, on one hand, this is basically Android. To make sure that every Harmony OS product is still compatible with Android apps, Huawei had to start with the basic open source, available to everyone version of Android, and then layer their OS on top of that. But then on the other hand, this whole unification of their various devices that they talked about years ago, I feel like they've done it. So if I swipe down from the control panel, I'll see something called Huawei Super Device. Click into that, and this is basically my entire solar system of Huawei gadgets. And then if you want to link two products, you just drag one into another. So if I drag my earphones into this tablet, they become the audio source instead of the speakers on the tablet. And then within that, I've got settings for how I want that relationship to function, like what kind of sound output I want my tablet to give to these earphones. But the coolest thing is what happens when you also throw a phone into the mix. So I'm getting to the phones themselves later, but just for the purpose of showing this feature, if I link my phone and my tablet together using Huawei Super Device, this is what happens. So that is my phone's home screen. And it's not just showing me what's on my phone. I can use my phone from this. And I spent the last few days figuring out all the things that means you can do, and it's very cool. So for example, if I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone and then I realize I actually want to go big screen, I just go into full screen on my phone, and then automatically it will not just full screen on the tablet, but actually turn it into the full YouTube tablet experience with the tablet user interface, even though it's still actually running off the phone. And that then also clears the phone to do something entirely different. You can do things like drag a photo that you've just taken on your phone into your tablet. I gotta give them credit for this. The devices feel so integrated that you actually forget when you do that you're sending something that's here to here. But then also crazy stuff. Like, let's say for example, I set my phone up here, and then from my tablet, I can have control over both sets of cameras, like a one-man production studio. The more I've looked into this super device feature, the more I've been surprised at how freeform it is. Essentially, it's however you want your Huawei products to work together, they can do that. Like if you have a Huawei tablet and a Huawei laptop, Super Device means that your tablet can become a second monitor, all wirelessly. Or let's say you wanted to draw something on your laptop, but your laptop's not touchscreen. Well, mirror that screen to your tablet, use your Huawei pen, and draw on that. So far, it's kind of like the Apple ecosystem, in that you feel both strongly encouraged and rewarded for each extra one of their products you buy into. So in isolation, I'd give this tablet a 6 out of 10, but that rating will increase as we add more products into the mix. But first, what are the earphones like? I gotta say, before this video, I'd never even considered actually using Huawei audio products, and I had no gauge on how good or bad they actually are. And Well, let's start with their entry-level FreeBuds SE2. Ironically named because I also got them for free when I bought the phones. But you can very much tell that these were designed to be Huawei's version of the basic Apple AirPods. Very similar in terms of material. They look the same apart from this weird C-shaped cutout, and the case actually has a really nice opening and closing mechanism. It's not in the slightest bit loose. The main difference versus AirPods is actually the price. Apple's earphones are $170, Huawei's are $49. So surely there's going to be a massive gap in sound quality, right? Well, actually, no. These earphones, considering the type of earphones they are and that they don't go inside your ears and they just kind of sit next to them, they sound amazing. You notice a little bit of, when loads of instruments are playing at once, a lack of separation between them. But apart from that, the sound is punchy, it's detailed, they don't leak as much noise as AirPods do. I'm actually playing Taylor Swift right now. Not Taylor Swift. I'm listening at my normal listening volume and you probably can't hear anything. And then also, these things last 40 hours of listening time versus Apple's 30 when you're using the case for recharging. My only real gripe was setup. You know when you're first trying to pair your earphones, you think, oh, maybe when I open the case, it'll activate Bluetooth and connect to my phone. No? Okay, well, maybe there's a button on the case that will activate the pairing mode. No. Do you know what you actually have to do? Touch and hold the small visible part of the touch-sensitive area on both earbuds at the same time while they're still in the case. It doesn't feel like it's been completely thought through. And then I had further problems getting the app on my phone to recognize them. Fiddly, but at least you only have to do that once, and it is all sorted now. So I would genuinely give these a 9 out of 10 and strongly recommend them. And they actually had me quite excited for the next tier. And that is the FreeBuds 5, which at $170 of 3.5 times the SE2s, exactly the same price as the AirPods, and definitely not free with the phone. And honestly, I have no idea what Huawei was thinking when they made these. You know, like within any given company's product lines, you expect some sort of design consistency, right? But, I mean, spot one similarity between these two earphones. Apart from the fact that they're both earphones. I do wonder if these were designed by completely separate teams. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Huawei actually has a lot more employees than you'd think. They're over 200,000, which is actually more than Apple, who are just over 150,000. I mean, these FreeBuds 5, they look like some sort of alien drop pod from another dimension. But do you know what? I respect that. You immediately notice a lot more tech. Like these earphones, they know when they're out of the case, they know when they're in and out of your ears, so they can pause and resume what you're playing. And yes, the case actually has a pairing button on it. And the app's actually really good. You can make your own equalizer, you can click Find My Earphones and they'll start beeping for you. It's a good feature. And also, as we were saying earlier, these synergize really well the more Huawei products you have. Because let's say I'm listening through earphones on my tablet, but I want to transfer those earphones now to listening to the audio from my phone. How do you do that? Well, open Super Device on your phone. You'll see all the available Huawei devices floating around this one. Drag the earphones in, and the switch in connection is instant. Plus, the FreeBuds 5 have noise isolation. You very rarely see active noise cancellation on earphones that don't actually go inside your ears, and upon using them, you can kind of see why. You can notice it the second you turn it on. Like it does muffle the background noise, but you kind of have to pay attention to it to notice the difference. It definitely doesn't have that sitting in your own bubble feeling that you get with proper noise cancelling buds. Mostly because with this type of design, there's way more likely to be slight gaps where outside noise can still get to your eardrums. And you know what? They're actually not even that comfy. You know, you kind of expect with a design this wacky that Huawei's figured out some sort of ergonomic secret that no one else has, which is kind of what they painted out to be. But no, really, they're just like you took a normal pair of earphones and you started melting them. They're similar feeling to the SE2s, but because they're heavier and a bit girthier, you just notice them a lot more. And the sound quality is, yes, slightly better than the SEs. It's high-res audio, but really, these are not worth 3.5 times the price of these. So I'm giving them a 7. And then the final pair of earphones is the top-of-the-line FreeBuds Pro 2, which have a pretty similar style to the 5s, but they're a bit less weird. And these are also co-engineered by DVLA. And yeah, most of these types of collaborations, they are a bit of a stretch, but I'd be lying if I said that logo didn't at least get me a bit excited. After all, the most impressive speaker I've ever heard in my life was made by DVLA. And you know what? Yeah, these are pretty pro. They're actually dual driver earphones, meaning that each earbud has not one, but 2 little speakers inside of it, which can help for specialization. You can have one focused on bass and one focused on higher notes. And honestly, these are a big step up in sound. Surprisingly comfy given their chunkiness and very isolating. You put them in, the world around you disappears. This is a good product. It's just Well, the finish is very glossy, so you put one finger on it and you will see that. And also, the battery life is not great. They say it should last 30 hours. I'd say it actually lasts about 25, which feels low compared to the 40 that you can get out of their most basic earphones. So I would give the Pros an 8. Okay, so far, the answer to our original question of how good are Huawei products now is actually pretty good, better than I expected. And that's without even talking about the smart watches, which I think is where they're doing some of their coolest stuff. So there's 2 new models as part of their GT4 range. They've got a 46mm version, which is a bit too active looking for me, but this 41mm is completely different. I guess they've decided to use these 2 different sizes to not just target people who want a big watch versus a small watch, but 2 types of people with completely different watch tastes. And that's the second thing. The fact that they're circular means that they actually do look like watches. I'm wearing this 46mm one for the last week, and even though it's not my personal favorite, I've already had 2 people specifically divert conversation to tell me they love my watch. I was torn about it at the start, because I thought, well, the more rectangular shape of the Apple Watch should be more practical, because it's a bit closer to the smartphone form factor. But honestly, I have not once felt like I'm missing out on functionality. These watches are running a formatted version of Harmony OS, the same OS as the tablets, but the thing is that every baked-in app feels like it uses the space of the screen fully and efficiently. You get thorough, detailed insights that link straight to the Huawei Health app on your phone. This definitely gives the impression of a really high-end bit of kit with some really good quality sleep tracking on top of that. And oh yeah, this is mildly creepy. Anytime you lose your phone,
I'm here.
What is that about? The fact that it's a circle means your watch faces can be much more realistic. And this idea they had to have a blooming watch face, where the flower opens up more and more the more exercise you do, is so smart. Probably the best thing actually is the battery. Most high-end smartwatches will get you through a full day. This will legitimately get you through a full week. I think these watches have really high potential. You know, they're just useful. Like, the number of times I've been sitting for long periods of time and then my watch will actually tell me that, encouraging me to get up and walk around for a bit. It's just, there's 2 things that let them down for me. One is the App Store. There's a more limited selection than most other smartwatches, and those apps have to be installed via your phone app. And then 2 is the consistency between the apps. Some apps are beautiful to look at and they run at a silky smooth 60 frames per second. Others look incredibly basic and run at poor frame rates, like genuinely quite reminiscent of the apps that you got when the very first smartphones were just appearing. Huawei actually has a ton of smartwatches, like probably more than any other company out there, all the way from sub $100 to plus $2,500. But this should give you an idea of the core software that underpins all of them. Right, time for the most interesting product of them all. Let's talk about the phones. So Huawei's had 2 major flagship launches recently. This one is the Huawei P60 Pro, which still comes with a full-size box including everything you need for the phone. I think this is still the default for phones sold in China, whereas it's more in the West where we have this whole focus on eco packaging. And I genuinely think this phone looks decadent. Huawei isn't afraid to try different things in the name of fashion, and in this case I'd say it's worked. But then this is the new Huawei Mate 60 Pro. And let me tell you, as a piece of hardware, this is the nicest phone I think I've ever held in my hands. I just think this company has made every possible correct decision and then gone further than anyone else has. This triple dot setup is, I think, a pretty cool way of still having proper 3D face scanning ability while minimizing the amount of solid black permanently on your screen. It's less of an interruption than Apple's Dynamic Island, and actually faster at face scanning. Plus, we've just realized today something else very cool it allows it to do, which is to constantly be looking to see if your eyes are looking at the phone screen. If they are, the screen will be on, and as soon as you look away, the screen will turn off, which is great for battery and also being able to check your notifications. It's like a smarter version of the always-on display, because it's only always on when you need it to be always on. The body of the phone is matte all the way around, and while the bottom can get some fingerprints, the top section is completely resistant. The corners, extremely curved. It doesn't feel like you're holding a sharp object. It's the opposite. And the fact that the backplate smoothly transitions into the sides means there's no seam to worry about. But then also, this screen. We've seen curved sides on a screen before, but this is really softly, evenly curved from every single angle, top, bottom, corners. And they've done that without making the borders uneven or having any weirdness with the corners, which you tend to get when you try and do this, and like you have with the P60. Honestly, if I could snap my fingers right now and make my iPhone or my S23 Ultra feel like this, I would do it right now. The glass on this is also meant to be something quite special. It's called Kunlun Glass 2, and they're saying it's the strongest smartphone glass in the world. So, tell you what, let's look at the rest of the phone, and then we will actually test it against Apple's Ceramic Shield. The hardware, of course. So honestly, I think the software, which is Harmony OS again, is very pretty. I mean, it's packed with bloatware, don't get me wrong. I'm counting 58 pre-installed apps, not to mention a separate popular apps folder, which is obviously just a way to advertise without it feeling like an advert. But animations, very smooth. Similar quality to the iPhone, but just with more flexibility and flair. And it works so well with the curved glass from every angle to create this feeling of elegance and gracefulness. And if you're enjoying this rare look into Huawei right now, then a lot has gone into making it happen, so a sub to the channel would be harmonious. Also, I'm heading off to Japan today for a once-in-a-lifetime trip where I'll get to see lots of cool tech like this, so follow me on Instagram if you want to keep up with that. Anyway, everything responds to your touch in a way that makes sense. Like when you move an app on your home screen, the apps around the point where you drop it, they pulse, as if they've just felt the impact of your move. When you're flicking between your recent apps, the app that you're currently holding actually pulls away from the rest, like it has real elasticity. And the transitions when you select your quick settings, it's clear that time has been spent here. But also, you can do some really unusual stuff, like sort your apps by color, which the ultra-organized part of me finds highly satisfying. And you can peek into apps, not just by holding them down like you can on other phones, but swiping up on their icons. Like, isn't this such a cool way to be able to speed dial? And there's so many really high-quality widgets, with even the ability to group multiple into one tile so they're more space efficient, and drag one widget on top of another to merge them into one. Okay, so all this surface-level stuff, that's all well and good, but one of the big questions on my mind here is, years on after the ban, where they lost contact with Google and so many other app and hardware suppliers, what has Huawei decided to do about it? How have they adapted their phones to still make them viable? So you do have a Huawei App Store. They call it the AppGallery. I would say it's functional, but it's janky. I think Huawei's realized that if they really want to compete, you can't feel like there's no app out there that you can't use because you're using a Huawei phone. So they found a way to make just about everything work, but it's not necessarily the smoothest workaround. Like, there are a lot of mainstream apps that you can just go onto AppGallery and download straight away, like Booking.com and Snapchat and Telegram, but there's a lot that aren't, like Instagram. And when that happens, the store, no joke, it takes you to the App Park's website to download the APK file and install it yourself. But also then there are some apps whose entire code base runs on Google services, which are banned from Huawei, like the map system in Uber, for example. So installing the app on the phone via APK file, it still wouldn't allow the app to run properly. So what Huawei's done is, instead of linking you to the apps to download, creating quick apps for the apps. Basically things that look like native apps, but are actually just shortcuts that take you to the mobile web pages. They work, they're not pretty. Now, there is also a tool they're bundling in called Gspace, which seemingly does give you full access to Google Apps, but it's just those apps have to be accessed via this specific Gspace portal, because I guess what's happening is when you enter this space, it's masking the real identity of your phone. It does work, but the fact that it is allowing you to access something that's banned makes it feel like a legal gray area. Oh, and it has a full screen ad every time you click on something. So if you're wondering what the state of Huawei is right now, then it's basically, if you decide that you want to use a Huawei phone and you're not in China, you still can. There's a way to make just about every single thing that you want to do work. You've just got to be ready to put up with some jankiness. The only thing that you can't change is chipsets, and this is where it gets really weird. So basically, when the US ban first happened, the reason it seemed like the end for Huawei was the chipset situation. Huawei was at the time having their chips made by TSMC in Taiwan, but they were then blocked from that because TSMC was using US technology. Qualcomm was another option for chips, but since they're an actual US company, they couldn't really help out either. And then it didn't seem like any Chinese company could make their own high-end chips, because the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines required to do so were literally being made by one company, who also couldn't talk to them. But two things have happened since then. One, that Huawei has now been granted a license to work with Qualcomm on the basis that they only buy 4G versions of their chips instead of the 5G versions, and older versions of those chips at that. So this Huawei P60 Pro, for example, even though it's a 2023 phone, it uses a nerfed 4G version of a 2022 Qualcomm chip. But then this new Mate60 Pro has done what the US didn't even think was possible. Somehow, out of nowhere, this thing apparently has its own made-in-China, modern architecture 7nm Kirin 9000S chip, capable of 5G download speeds. These are all things that, according to US sanctions, should not have been able to happen. Even Even though not bleeding edge tech, it seems like the idea of the US sanctions was to effectively send Huawei back into the stone age of technology, and this is a clear demonstration of how that actually hasn't happened. So there's a lot of rumors going on right now. Some people speculate that it's actually a 14nm process that's been modified to act like a more recent 7nm chip. Some reports are saying it's a reskinned version of a chip that Huawei used to get from TSMC before they were banned. Or a Chinese company actually has internally rebuilt from the ground up the tech required to make proper high-end 5G chips. No concrete answers yet, but it's all just very weird. Alright, but the cameras were always the highlight of Huawei phones, so where are they now? Well, if you watch my video about the smartphone camera explained, you'll find this especially interesting, because these phones, as well as using their ultra-wide cameras, can also use their 3.5 times telephoto cameras for close-up macro shots, which is honestly better. It means you can get super close to objects without actually needing to get super close and distort them or block all the light getting to them, and the end shots just look really high quality and cinematic. And also, these phones have a completely variable aperture. So you go into Pro mode, and just like with a real high-end lens, you can adjust this dial to select any aperture you want in between f1.4 and f4. I gotta say, I miss these cameras so much. I mean, they have like the fastest shutter time of any phone. The stabilization is amazing. I took this on a motorway. My car was shaking, this camera was not. They have super wide front cameras for big group shots, and the night mode. The night mode is as capable as I remember it to be versus its peers. I actually took these against my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and while Huawei has a slight leg up because its main camera is naturally more zoomed in, it's equally pretty clear that they haven't fallen behind here. Okay, so you film on the P60 Pro, and I'm gonna do this durability test. Okay, have you ever got one of these texts or one of these fake login attempt emails? I know, I get them like 3 times a week. And essentially when that happens, someone is trying to either hack you or scam you. But how do they even get your information? Okay, this is height 1 drop on Apple Ceramic Shield. Completely unmarked. Well, let's say that you play an online game and that game's servers got hacked. Now, anyone who's hacking game servers, they're not doing it because they just got bored on their day off. No, they're going to sell that data to people who want to use it for stuff like this. And if you use the same username and password across multiple accounts, then you're basically exposed from every angle. All right, height drop 2. Yikes. Still okay. And that is why I use Guardio. Guardio is pure security. It alerts me in real time once my passwords leak. It lets you know where those passwords have leaked from so you can take immediate action. Okay, this has to break now. 3, 2, 1. Unbelievable. Enough of this ball. Hammer from height 2. There we go. That was quite serious damage. Guardio also protects you from emails, which you might think are innocent, but are actually designed to steal your data, web pages that are constructed to get hold of your payment details, and also just malware in general. And we've got a 7-day trial, as well as 20% off the already affordable subscription cost, which covers 5 users under 1 account. And that'll auto-apply if you head to guard.io/boss. The iPhone is very durable. Let's see if this is the same. That does nothing. Okay, let's drop from H2. Still nothing. And the final test to see if Kunlun glass can beat ceramic shield. That took 3 smacks. So actually, yes, that is the toughest glass I've ever seen on a phone.